thank you, Scott, for inviting us to come and present to the Association of Energy Engineers. And just a quick FYI, you guys are doing a really good job. I like the new arrangements you have with organizing Zoom meetings and all that. And you've been getting some really good programs. Just as an introduction, if you don't know me, my name is Fred Yaber. I'm with the State Energy Conservation Office. I'm an engineer with the Energy Office, and if you're not familiar with the Energy Office, we provide energy efficiency resources to public entities, public sector entities, local governments, schools, state agencies, and energy resources and training to building professionals regarding energy efficiency, energy codes, financing, funding, and so forth. Last year, the State Energy Office reestablished a partnership with the Energy Services Coalition, which is an organization of energy services performance contracting companies. And in a very short time period, we had about 75 members in the organization of the energy. We formed a chapter, the Texas Energy Services Coalition. And the whole idea is to encourage more learning and use of the energy services performance contracting, which is now added the G, guaranteed energy services performance contracts. And so we've been going around to the different organizations and talking about the Texas chapter of the Energy Services Coalition and the membership, and also talking a very, what would I call it? Not a 101, but a very basic understanding of what energy services performance contracting is. And, I encourage everyone to look into in your browser, the Texas Energy Services Coalition. And today, one of our members of the Energy Services Coalition, who's been doing quite a bit of work, is going to talk about energy savings performance contracting. His name is Vince Zubicek, and he's with the company, one of our member companies, E3. And he's an engineer, and he's done quite a number of projects. And I am going to just introduce him and turn it over to Vince to present. This is a presentation, a standard presentation that we've been doing all around the state for public sector entities. And if you're more interested, call us, look us up on the website, or call us at the State Energy Conservation Office as well. So Vince, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Fred, and thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for taking time to meet with us today. I'm Vince Zubicek with E3 Integral Solutions, here representing the Energy Services Coalition. I'm looking on this Zoom screen, and I recognize many of the names, and so I know that many of you are familiar with performance contracting, but I'd like to go through the presentation that the Energy Services Coalition has put together as far as an overview on the basics, so all of you in the engineering community can see the message that this organization is putting out. Fred, I really appreciate the introduction. The only thing I'll correct is, especially within this group, I am not an engineer. I'm on the business development side, and so any technical questions, I'll make sure to pass those off to somebody else in the group. But definitely want to give you all an overview of kind of what the coalition is striving to achieve through the Energy Savings Performance Contracting Program, and then just encourage you to come check out a meeting as we have them, I believe, quarterly right now, Fred, and come check those out and see how your organization might be able to just communicate and work with our coalition. So, Scott, I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me know if this works, everybody. Okay, everybody can see that? All right, very good. And so I've given a few of these presentations already, and so please feel free over Zoom. So please feel free to jump in if you have any questions. When I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the whole gallery. I can only see parts of it, and so please feel free to unmute and stop me if you've got any questions as we go along. Me and Fred's main purpose here is to just let y'all know more about performance contracting if you don't know about it already in our organization. So this is our presentation that we give as an organization to the many conferences that we go speak to. We want to introduce the coalition, give the basics of guaranteed energy savings performance contracting, and then just get an idea of any questions that those of you in the engineering community might have about the program. You know, the program's been around for a long time. I've been in the industry for 20 years, and it has its iterations. It evolves. You know, the Energy Services Coalition was around in the early 2000s, and it kind of went away. And Fred has really spearheaded the effort to bring it back. And so really want to do our best to get out to all the organizations that we can and get the message out that there are a lot of companies out there right now doing this type of work in the public sector. So those of you that are either in the public sector or have clients in the public sector that would love to communicate with you and talk about the opportunities here. So first, the Energy Services Coalition, I think Fred wrapped it up pretty well. It's an organization of both public sector entities and private sector ESCOs, and then also organizations like SPEAR, like the State Energy Conservation Office, that all come together and meet on a regular basis to see how we can promote and encourage folks to look into energy savings performance contracting as a way to resolve building needs. And so again, Fred mentioned it pretty well. It's been back kicked up and working for about a year plus now here in the state. You know, as you might guess with Texas, as it got going, the membership shot straight up. You know, I'm wanting to say it's one of the larger chapters in the country already. So definitely a good place to get information for those of you that might not be involved with our group yet. So what I'll do now is go through just a few minutes of the energy savings performance contracting basics as a method of getting work done in public facilities. So the next couple slides, having done this for this type of work for 20 years, I think that the organization really sums up what energy savings performance contracting is as a method really well. And if you take anything away, please take the next two slides. Performance contracting is a procurement method for getting needs accomplished in public buildings. And what you can get as a separate added benefit of that is have energy savings guaranteed and redirect those utility costs into improving your buildings. Now, there's many definitions, there's many variations of that between the state level, the Department of Energy on the national level, and then what each of us as independent ESCOs go out and talk to public entities in the marketplace. But I want to stress that it's a procurement method and that the State Energy Conservation Office can help you and provide guidelines as well for the performance contracting process and how to effectively and legally get this program done within public buildings. The takeaway from that is that performance contracting is a procurement method. What it is not is it's not a financing mechanism. I know that that's something, at least over my career, and probably even myself have talked about. It's a way to finance improvements. And it's really not that, because you don't want to talk about how you're going to get energy savings at the end of the day. A good performance contract redirects those energy expenditures into your buildings to actually achieve needs and accomplish needs that need to be accomplished throughout the buildings, and actually get things done that maybe the entity had no other way of getting done. And so it's really not a way to save money, because in concept, those dollars are going to go to pay for those improvements. But in a lot of situations, there was no other way for that school district or that city or that county to get those projects done. So it became a very effective way to redistribute those costs that were going out the door and investing in their facilities. Now, having said that, we also want to be careful when we talk about performance contracting, because depending on how you're running your buildings right now, quite often it's not going to resolve all of your needs that you may have, whether it be HVAC or building automation upgrades or water conservation and plumbing upgrades or roofing or things like that. It's quite often that a performance contract can resolve some of your needs, but it's not going to necessarily resolve all of those needs that exist. The energy savings that are generated are only going to go so far. And so what we have on the slide is on the bottom is it's not too good to be true, because we would encourage folks that are looking into performance contracting as a method of doing business to take a very conservative approach. Do studies on your buildings, make sure that the savings are realistic, and then look at your needs in your buildings and make sure that performance contracting is an effective way to accomplish those needs. If you have all of that in one bundle, performance contracting can be a tremendous tool to go and improve buildings and actually get capital needs accomplished in public entities. And we've seen it over the years in school districts, again, cities, counties, colleges, and even on the state agency level, there's been entities that have done projects. And so I've talked about most of this already, so I'll be brief on this slide, but the goal that I think is very important is that when you're looking into a performance contract, that your building needs should drive the discussion. How can this program possibly fund needed capital improvements? And so the starting point for a lot of this discussion is, what is the deferred maintenance needs? What is your CIP project list? What budget constraints might your clients or might your entity have? How has a city, county, or school district fallen behind on modernization of the buildings? If one of those parts can come into play, performance contracting can possibly have a tremendous benefit. And then when you get the guaranteed energy savings on top of it, as a procurement method and as a requirement for getting these projects done, it can have that financial benefit of shifting the risk from the entity that's doing the performance contract to the contractor, and making sure that those savings are achieved and that your costs are truly offset throughout the life of the project. So we've got a couple charts here as well, just visually to show you what an energy savings performance contract might mean for your organization or for your clients out in the space. In the existing situation, you've got a public entity that's sending dollars out the door for utilities and other associated costs. And put simply, when you're working with an energy services company to do a performance contract, that company's goal and initiative is going to be to find all of those dollars that are going out your door, and how can we redirect those dollars back within your doors, within your walls, to make tangible and beneficial improvements happen within your buildings. And the number that we put up is 20 to 40% on energy savings. That's obviously going to vary based on your specific entity, your specific buildings, and how those are being run right now. But we're seeing quite often across the board that there are energy savings of 20% or more in many of these public buildings across the state, just because the needs that are present go hand in hand with generating energy savings, whether it's outdated lighting technologies, maybe you're not at LED yet, or outdated building automation. Believe it or not, we still see pneumatics in a lot of buildings as we go across the state. And then HVAC improvements, where you're talking the end of the useful life for that equipment, whether that's DX equipment at 15 years plus, or your chilled water, your boiler equipment that obviously has a longer useful life. But I'm sure y'all know as well as I do that you're going to come across that equipment where you're going to, that 40-year-old boiler or that 25 or 30-year-old chiller, and you're going to see the need for that. And so hopefully performance contracting can generate enough dollars to go in and help you make those improvements. Moving along, so in the ideal situation for a performance contract, it's going to be able to align all of these factors that you have on this slide. And if it's not able to align that, then you need to make sure that you're working deliberately through those processes to get to that point, or use another method to get the improvements done. But when a performance contract works well, you've got your decision makers aligned with your legal side because you've got an official procurement method to get this work done. Your energy manager likes it because they're going to see a drop on the utility bills within the entirety of that organization. You see a solid construction method where these performance contracting companies can come in and be the construction manager. So your expertise in engineering and construction is aligned. You see that, that with a performance contract, when it's done right, you actually have less maintenance afterwards and not more. You've got the procurement lined up. You've got the financial aspect lined up. And then finally, as a public entity, you can then go to your community and say that we've done everything we can with all of our dollars that we have in-house, and particularly our utility spend. We're reducing that as much as we can, and we're making those dollars more valuable by investing them in infrastructure upgrades. So when it comes time to ask for a bond proposition or something along those means, that we're not having to ask for as much money as we might have to, because we're using these internal processes through a performance contract to get those improvements made. Moving on, here's our slide on the performance contracting process. And we've got a lot of steps here. I'll go through them briefly, but to me, the most important steps that you have here are step 1 and step 2. That if your entity or if one of your clients as an engineer is interested in the performance contracting process, build a team on how you're going to look at that and how you're going to make a decision on whether performance contracting is best for you. And then get a preliminary audit done. We've got another slide here in the presentation that talks about it a little bit more in depth, but a preliminary audit is a free study where these energy services companies, including E3, companies like us, will come in and do a free study of your buildings and identify energy savings potential and identify how those needs that you might have on the deferred maintenance side work with the energy savings potential and can possibly build an effective performance contracting project. So I would encourage you to get that free preliminary audit done. And even outside of the ESCO industry, if you want to get a preliminary audit done, you can talk to Fred, and SECO offers free preliminary audits as well as part of the exploration into their Lone Star program. And so you've got many options out there to get a study done and see before that public entity has spent any money at all on whether performance contracting is a good, feasible program for that entity. If it does turn out that it is a good project and a worthwhile program to move forward, then you've got the RFQ process. Performance contracting statute in all public entities asks for a request for qualifications and not an RFP. So your public entity will be choosing an ESCO based on their qualifications. You'll select that ESCO, move into an investment grade audit, which is a detailed audit where the ESCO will then build the project based on and document their energy savings guarantee. They'll document their final project and price on a lump sum basis, and then show you the project scope that will be implemented during the construction phase. Then, as a mandatory part of Texas state law, on all public entities, you will have to hire a separate independent third party to review the energy savings for the performance contract and make sure that the energy savings that have been calculated and guaranteed by the ESCO are reasonable based off of that third party's engineering opinion. Then you move into the project construction and then the follow-up with the measurement and verification process over the term of the contract that you've entered into with the ESCO, with the performance contracting firm. So The great thing about the performance contracting process is it gives you the opportunity to see if it's a good fit for your public entity before you've made that dollar investment to expend to get the improvements done. So you really have a win-win opportunity to see if it's a good program for you. As I just talked about, the investment grade audit and the preliminary assessment, here's what they consist of, and here's some of the differences. Again, the preliminary assessment is what it is. It's a preliminary. Usually the ESCO is not going to spend more than maybe a day or two at the site. They're going to estimate the savings. They're going to estimate the project cost, and then use that as a tool to educate that entity to see if a performance contract is a worthwhile program for them. Whereas the investment grade audit is a much more detailed look at the buildings, and the goal of that audit is to come up with a performance contracting project that will not only meet the needs of that entity, but also meet legal qualifications and all the appropriate procurement qualifications as well. So that's most of the meat of the information. As we go forward, I want to give you some other tips on kind of as your entity, or if you're working with one of your public entity clients moving forward, on what that actually might look like to engage with an ESCO. But the first step is giving you an idea of what the information looks like that these ESCOs typically like to get from a first look basis in order to do the preliminary audit and then to do the investment grade audit later. First and most importantly, you know, the energy savings will drive part of the project, but I think more importantly than that, it's very important that you share with that ESCO what the building needs are, and you know, whether the performance contracting firm has the expertise to handle it or not. I think that you always want to start from the place that these are the goals that we want to get accomplished. How can a performance contract help us solve that? And so I'd encourage you to start from that discussion point, and then gather the utility data, whether, you know, 1 to 3 years is what we usually recommend as an organization. And then you've got facility information on a very detailed basis that can really help the ESCO to provide some clarity on how they can resolve your needs and make sure they're doing it in a way where the energy savings can also help you accomplish those needs by building a project that pays for itself. And then as I was preparing for this presentation, the one thing that I would add on this slide is also be mindful, obviously, of what the pandemic has done to your facilities. You know, is your last 12 months of data the most accurate data to use when building a performance contract? I don't know that answer. You'll know that answer better than I do. But we're seeing a lot of buildings right now that are 10% occupied, 20% occupied on the state level. We know that school buildings are now finally getting back to, you know, 60, 70, 80% occupied. And so if you're building a performance contract, you need to have that in mind, as well as what is the best representation of the utility usage of those buildings. And so, you know, talk with your ESCO as you're working with them, and come to an agreement on what that looks like from an energy usage standpoint. And then we also want to let you know that outside of the energy services companies, one just very valuable option that public entities in Texas have at their disposal is, if you're building a performance contract and it looks like a good, viable option to you, you have a wealth of financing options to go and get that project done, and things that can really bring added benefit to the table when you're doing a performance contract. You've got many ways to do it. The lease purchase and the maintenance tax note have been around for many years. Those are ways on the operations side to get that upfront money, to borrow that money and have that payback align over time with the energy savings that are being achieved, so you can truly achieve a self-funding project and get those needs accomplished. You've got, you know, Fred and Eddie at SECO through their Lone Star program, where that program has been around for many years, and many entities, when they do a performance contract, decide to utilize the Lone Star program because of how it matches up with all of the energy efficiency guidelines as part of it to get that program done. And then you also have, bond and fund balance or other type opportunities available. And then depending on where you're at, where you're located, you'll have those opportunities for rebates, whether it's Austin Energy or CPS or the Encore Center Points of the world as well. Make sure to take advantage of any incentives that might be out there on the market. And then as we kind of wrap up here, the presentation, and then I think I've noticed that there might be a couple of questions in the chat. So I'll definitely get that. I'll definitely get to those questions as I wrap up here. But want to give you some feedback from an organization standpoint, from the ESC's view, as far as picking and researching an energy services company. There are many of us here in the state that are actively working on promoting performance contracting. And so there's many that might be knocking on your door. So here's a couple of tips to determine which might be the right partner for you. First of all, reach out to as many folks as you can that have implemented a performance contract. Try to find those that have been successful and those that have been unsuccessful, and ask why. Why were they successful? Why were they unsuccessful? And build your own case for who you would want to work with as an energy services company. And then, interviews can be a very important part of it as well, who you might feel most comfortable with. Everybody always puts their best foot forward when they put a statement of qualifications together, but I think doing interviews can be an effective next step on who you might feel most comfortable with, and asking questions on the fly, and which company might be able to respond best to that and do the best for your specific needs in your buildings. And then also, preliminary audits and site visits can be allowed as well to just build those relationships with those ESCOs and see which ones might be the best for you. And then we also want to hit briefly on, as we mentioned, state law prescribes an RFQ process for picking an ESCO partner. And we want to talk a little bit about how that's different. I think that most of you on the call know the difference between an RFQ and an RFP, so I won't belabor that. But as you go through this ESCO and performance contracting process, like I just said, it comes down to picking those references, doing the interviews, because you're going to be selecting off of qualifications versus having a price be part of that equation. So you want to be very deliberate in how you go about selecting your partner, and know that there are a lot of options out there beyond the RFQ process. We're seeing a lot of ESCOs now going towards the interlocal and cooperative route to work with public entities on that. And so you want to ask questions as well there on, is that most effective for your public entity to go the cooperative route? And that if you do go that route, do you have an effective way to procure the engineering part of that as well? Because, as you all know, engineering cannot be procured through a purchasing cooperative. So you want to make sure that that company that you might be working with for that gives you a sound and legal approach and process to go and get that work done. But if you do all of this, if you talk to those references, if you do those interviews, we at the Energy Services Coalition feel very confident that you can find the right partner and then get a performance contract done that can be very effective for your facilities. Then I'll wrap up here as well, talking a little bit about the measurement and verification process. That's a critical part of a performance contract, where if you're going to have on paper an energy savings guarantee, you need to make sure that there is a good measurement and verification process in place to make sure that those savings are being met, and that in the case that those savings are not being met, that the public entity has a clear and very delineated way to make sure that they're being compensated for that shortfall on savings. And so as a coalition, we utilize the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, IPMVP, to make sure that there are very standardized processes to ensure that the energy savings are being achieved, and that, when this is done correctly, you're really seeing the risk move for this from the school district or the college or the city that's doing it over to the ESCO. You know, an effective M&V program really shifts that risk over to the ESCO to make sure that those savings are being achieved. And if the savings aren't being achieved, that there is a shortfall check written to that school district or to that city to make sure that the city is made whole from what they were promised as they started this performance contract. That's most of the meat and potatoes of the presentation that Fred and I have for today. We do want to point you to some resources moving forward. You know, we would encourage you to look into the Texas chapter of the Energy Services Coalition. We've got case studies there. We've got some sample contracts. As always, the State Energy Conservation Office has been a great resource for everyone, you know, whether it's performance contracting or guidelines for how to do these projects, and then, you know, pointing you towards the right legislation to get these projects done. SECO's always been a tremendous resource, not just for public entities, but also for those in the ESCO community. You've got the Department of Energy Performance Contracting Toolkit, and then we also have the SPEAR, which is the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency, as a resource, as a very knowledgeable resource that you can go to look into how energy efficiency projects can be done here in the state of Texas. And then we would encourage all of you to attend our next ESC chapter meeting, which is December 2nd at 1 o'clock. I've got the Zoom link here, but please shoot me an email or send me a chat message if you'd like more info on that ESC meeting there that we're having coming up in December. And with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Fred. And I noticed that there's some questions in the chat, so we can maybe start looking through that as well.
Fred, you're muted.
That always happens. So, Vince, you see the chat questions there. You want to try to get to them, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I see some good questions here, and I'll start going through one by one. There was a question about 4CP and demand response, as far as including those type of technologies in a performance contract. And I do see that there are some other folks from the ESCO industry. I'll be straight up with you, here in Texas at least. I have looked into demand response as an individual issue. As far as, you know, wrapping it in as a driving factor in a performance contract, we haven't seen that a whole lot yet. I think it's really going to come down to what type of programs and incentives your utility provider is providing for that demand response, to see if that can become an effective part of your overall performance contracting package. And when I say that, generating some benefit to that entity to make sure that it's helping you offset some of your other costs of those needs and goals that you'd like to get achieved, you know, whether it's HVAC improvements or renewable projects or LED or building automation or things like that. So, you know, from my aspect, we haven't seen a ton of the demand response or energy response or the backup generators being included, but I certainly would not preclude that from being possible within the scope of a performance contract. It's really going to come down to taking that realistic approach as to what benefit each of those things can provide and how you can fit that within all of your other needs within your performance contracting program. Next question, how does the changing requirement for outside air that decreases efficiency of return air affect current contracts? Man, that's the number one thing that we're dealing with a lot of the folks that we're doing energy conservation projects right now. I think that, you know, just as I have one school district in mind that I'm working with that we're doing a Lone Star funded project with, where we worked with them as COVID started and kind of shifted our focus from being the energy efficiency engineering type firm working with them to taking that next level and looking at the ASHRAE advice that was coming down at that time as far as how ventilation can possibly help aid in the process of this, and then worked with them to make realistic decisions on how to increase the outside air in their buildings, and then assisting them as they wanted it to know what the energy savings impact of that would be. And so it's just very important to for those of us in the ESCO community to be very upfront with our clients that if you're making this decision for pandemic purposes, and we understand if you have to make that decision that there is going to be an energy savings consequence to that, and that the ESCO community should be out there to help them quantify that, what that is, so then the client has even more information to decide what they want to do with their buildings. Because at the end of the day, you really want to be working with an ESCO partner that understands that you have to run your buildings different ways at certain times, and how can this performance contract be adaptable to that, and can it be adaptable to it? And so I think that there's many out there in the ESCO community that can provide that adaptability for these types of for this type of climate. And then I'd love to get some feedback from you guys. One thing that our engineering team at E3 has looked into is these HVAC related, I don't know what the right thing to call it, or pathogen type measures, whether it's filtration, whether it's UV, whether it's bipolar ionization. We've tried to research those as extensively as we can, within E3, and then drawn our own conclusions on what's best for that specific entity, whether it's a city, county, or whether it's a school district, and then provide our best recommendations based on that. And so that's become a part of this equation as well in the energy efficiency space is, can bipolar ionization be an effective way to help pathogen control as a secondary measure? Is UV effective? Is the higher filtration effective? And then what is the cost associated with all of those as well? So that's been a very intensive topic inside the ESCO world as well. And I'll admit, still an evolving topic. We want to make sure that we're providing the right advice to our clients in the public sector space. Next question, from a procurement perspective, how are performance contracting services solicited by a public entity versus design build? So I see this question is from Dub. I think that, let me know if this answers your question, Dub, but I think that performance contracting and design build have some similarities, but they're different from a procurement perspective, at least from my viewpoint, in that performance contracting, whether it's cities, counties, school districts, higher ed, have their own section in the government code, or the applicable code might be the education code, on how they're procured through the RFQ process, whereas design build is also procured through an RFQ process, but it has its own prescriptive way of things that are to be asked for through that design build process and through that RFQ. And so I would say from a general perspective, it's similar, but you want to be very careful in that, because they are delineated separately in the law, that that public entity is following that procurement process for that law. So if they're going the performance contracting route, they're making sure that they're very aware and knowledgeable of that specific law and are doing that RFQ the right way. Specifically, what I see is that a lot of times in the school district market, you'll see a very specific process where the school district may or may not have to actually go to their board to get the design build procurement method approved before they even put out the RFQ. And so those are the type of things where it's very important to look into that specific entity's process, and then also the state process for how that procurement should get done. And send me another message to make sure that I answered that question okay.
Yeah, Vince, can you hear me? I'm off mute now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I was getting at, that there is a decision, I guess, a decision point on the procurement. And, once they kind of head down one path or the other, it is one thing or another. It is a design build or a ESPC. And I know that some public entities have thought or been under the impression that there is some latitude and they're sort of one and the same, which they're not. They're two different things. So there needs to be some deliberate thought at the front end about which direction they're headed.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. No, thanks for adding that, Dub. That's a good point. Moving down the list, I've got some other questions here. Largest hurdle company has faced getting to a contract, and then what are some other hurdles? I think that from my perspective, when you're talking about a performance contract, it's and I talked about this during the presentation. Can we get a performance contract that brings all those energy savings benefits, but then also, chips away at a lot of those facility needs that are already present, absent of a performance contract? Obviously the ideal performance contract is something where we're able to come in and save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and we were able to knock off the top 3 or 4 priorities. You had these 30-year-old chillers to replace. You had air handling improvements you needed to make. You had 100 air conditioning units that needed to be replaced. I think that's where we get to a big hurdle sometimes, is making sure that we provide a valuable project that can accomplish some of the needs that already existed absent of the ESCO coming in and talking about this program. If that makes sense, is really making it, the goal is to make this performance contract a valuable part of the initiatives that are currently going on within that public entity, and generating enough energy savings, realistic energy savings, to make sure that happens. And then I would say that that's the main hurdle. And then on top of that, as a practice, you want to make sure that when we do those preliminary studies, that you provide a realistic outlook on what the energy savings are going to be. And, you don't want to be too conservative to where the savings don't look good, but you also don't want to be too aggressive to where the savings are overstated, and then that entity moves forward to a project and then those savings aren't there. And so I think that's one of our big hurdles and challenges that we try to be very conscious on at the preliminary stage, is to make sure that we're providing a realistic approach to energy savings, and that these energy savings that we're telling you at the preliminary level are savings that can actually be achieved later on.
Yeah, I kind of get that. Some of the issues that I had with my former employer was, hey, if we go with an ESCO to take care of deferred maintenance and stuff, we are admitting that we are not being, fiduciarily responsible and actually taking care of our stuff. That, and you have some ESCOs that come in for the perspective of, okay, we'll help you save money, we'll bring in a little bit of behavioral, but we want to, we're going to be the GC for any of your energy saving stuff. And you've got that one outlier out there, Synergistics, that comes in and says, no, we're just going to give you the money back and you can do whatever you want with it. And so it's those comparisons, and it's more of the institutional problems of facing the reality that, quite honestly, public entities don't do a very good job with deferred maintenance when it's politicians and educators focused on other areas.
Right. That's a great point, where I think that that's something, and that's a part of it to manage, right? If you're coming in saying all of this work has to be done, then ultimately somebody in your desk is going to get asked, well, why didn't it get done? Right? Well, it didn't get done because you didn't, in all likelihood, you weren't given the resources to get it done. Right.
Well, there's that, but there's also what I had come to see was that, the district administration had the board members wrapped around their finger, and they were more focused on color patterns and murals when it came to buildings. And the focus was on governance only, and don't look at the other part of the mandate for a school district, which is oversight of management. And that's where I see many of the school districts is just the board of trustees are just completely abdicating that responsibility, kind of like Congress having to rely on the judiciary, the judiciary having to take over for the Congress not doing their job. Well, that comes back to the attitudes and the norms within certain school districts.
Absolutely. I think in my best case scenarios, Ryan, we try where we're able to accomplish a lot of the deferred maintenance needs. It comes down to building that consensus, right? That, hey, everybody here agrees that these need to be done. You may or may not have a bond at your disposal. You may or may not have a CFO that likes maintenance side borrowing, through M&O tax notes. And so what is the best way to get it done? And that, where I've been able to get it accomplished is by showing everybody at the same time, at the same table, that we can accomplish this. It's not the be all end all maybe, but it does get some of this work done. And absent of it, you might still be in the same situation you are now. That's, where I've been able to get that over the hump, that you're talking about. That's usually where we get to with those clients. Okay, so going down the list, appreciate all the questions today. This is awesome. Mention limitations for procuring engineering services. Could you explain, does this mean when selecting an ESCO, you must separately select any required professional engineering services? So when you go through the performance contracting process, RFQ, you do not have to select an engineer separately. That is included in the stated procurement for those services. So you do not have to do a separate procurement. Likewise, if you go the design build process, that's included in that as well. What I'm alluding to for separately procuring engineering services is to work with your legal advisor on if you're going to decide to go the interlocal or purchasing cooperative route for these services, to make that determination on whether those engineering services are necessary, and if they are, how you will go about procuring those. Because as I understand it, purchasing cooperative law does not allow for you to procure engineering services through that mechanism. So you'll have to go through the professional services route to do that. And so I would consult with your public entity legal advisor to make sure that that's buttoned up correctly, so that doesn't come back to get you later possibly. And then as I move down here, I've got Cliff, who gave a great, if you're not reading the chat, I'm going to read this, Cliff, if that's okay. He gave some great feedback for the demand response. He said, demand response savings are derived from ERCOT. The dollar valuation of demand response changes quarterly and therefore not predictable with extreme accuracy over time. So if the demand response savings are included in a performance contract, then it should be negotiated separately from the energy savings. And so I appreciate that feedback, Cliff, and I think that would be some good advice for the group today. All right, and then I've got one from Eddie. In my experience, are the folks in the financing side of public entities getting involved to make sure the performance guarantees are being met after the project is in the project repayment phase, say 5 to 7 years after the retrofits were completed? So Eddie, when I answer this, go ahead and unmute and make sure that I'm answering this correctly. In my experience, the folks, if you're talking about the financing side, the lease purchase companies that do that are the ones that do the M&O tax notes. I typically do not see any follow-up on that as to, well, that's a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that answer, because I believe that there are some financing companies that will follow up with their clients to make sure that those savings are being achieved. And and so, just in my experience. So is that kind of the direction that you're going with that question, Eddie?
That's one side of the what I'm looking for. The other side is actually from the borrower side. How, a lot of times what happens is when it gets into the repayment phase, the energy managers change. They lose touch with the project. You send in the M&V reports. Nobody knows what to do with them. And then the people in the finances and the finance side of the public school or public school district or local government, they're in the mode of just repaying the note, basically, but not necessarily checking the performance guarantees. So are you seeing, so it can fall between the cracks. And so I was wondering if you saw that happening.
I don't know that I've seen it fall between the cracks, just because I think that when, the onus ultimately, if it's a performance contract set up as we at the Energy Services Coalition have set it up, that responsibility is going to shift to the ESCO to make sure that has been achieved. And if it's not being achieved, that it's being made whole relative to the financing part of it. And then, so you've got some mechanisms there as a public entity to account for that on the front end, right, with the third party review. And then, I think it's really going to come down to that individual ESCO to making sure that is being accounted for on a yearly basis. But, as I'm thinking back, Eddie, having done this for a while, I think that there might be some instances in my career where I've seen the financing company and the financial advisor checking in on that. And I can see that being most likely than when it comes from that financial advisor doing the M&O side financing, that's also the actual financial advisor for that entity, if that makes sense.
Are the public entities good about holding you all accountable when you get 5 or 7 years down the line?
I think so. Those ones that are, that have that long of an agreement, I think that they, the challenge that we have as an ESCO is most typically when you're getting 5 to 7 years down the road, you're dealing with changeover of administration. And so you're dealing with the re-education process of getting that school district back up to speed on the reasons why they did that performance contract. And so, yeah, we see that relatively often with those that are down the line, that it becomes not so much a making sure that the savings are there, Eddie, but it almost becomes a re-education process on why the project was done and why we have that relationship, because it's very often that within that 5 to 7 years, you'll have a new superintendent, you'll have a new director of operations, new assistant superintendent. And so it's critical that ESCO still be there to re-educate them on why the project was done. Was that kind of the direction you were going with that, Eddie?
Yes, I appreciate your input.
Okay. Okay, and I see one of your comments, Ryan. I'm gonna contact you offline about that. And then I've got one other. With reducing carbon footprint is growing as a driver, what is perspective of introducing CO2 as well as energy and water as a driver for performance contracting? Have we seen guaranteed carbon reduction as a deliverable via performance contracting? Man, that's a great question. I'm just looking at the screen here. The only person I know for sure is Jennifer. I'd be interested in Jennifer's take from her company's perspective, but typically when we do performance contracts, it really, there's some great added benefits, and carbon footprint is something that, we delineate to our clients regularly is, hey, this is how you're affecting your carbon footprint from an environmental perspective. I'll just say, the vast majority of the folks that we work with, it ends up becoming a dollars and cents decision where they're, they like the carbon footprint part of it. And it is something that we can go to the community to discuss. But at the end of the day, they want to make sure that the dollars are there to pay for a project and get some of these needs accomplished. And I don't mean to call you out, Jennifer, but do y'all folks see it kind of the same way?
Hey, Vince, and you've done a great job representing the ESC today. Thank you. I personally have not had a project that's had any sort of guaranteed carbon reduction involved in it. But similar to your answer, Vince, I think the beauty with performance contracting, you can do a lot of different things. And it kind of opens things up to, depending on the public entity, what they want to include. So to my knowledge, we don't have any sort of legislation in Texas that allows us to claim it as something, because we can claim the savings around energy related to electric, gas, and water. But when it comes to something like carbon reduction, I don't know. But I'm sure contractually, if a public entity wanted to have their provider include that as something in the project and have them be on the hook for essentially, I'm sure that could be worked out. But I wish I had a more direct answer. And Cliff, I'm curious if, with the question being asked, if you might know some more about it. I'd love to hear, because that would be educational for me as well.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if what I look like. I had a bike accident the other day, so I got sores up here. I turned the camera off. But no, the Texas Energy Summit's coming right up. And Scott, I'm sure this meeting here needs to be wound down. I see what time it is. But maybe we can just put a plug in for those that are interested to look at the Texas Energy Summit. There's some breakout sessions that are associated with policy and how we can do a better job across our state for environmental as well as energy efficiency. And one of the topics, I believe, is that all of us, the entire AAE organization and those that are in energy efficiency, forever, we've always, performed our work with dollars in mind as well as new equipment. But as we move forward with, the environmental concerns are such a big deal. And Scott, as well as anybody, or most everybody here knows, that the easiest carbon to reduce is, through efficiency. And so I just think that there should be some policies put forth where we introduce, carbon reduction as a driver, that it actually has a monetary value. And I'll raise my hand. Yeah, I'm a Republican and a conservative, and I don't believe in, paying taxes on my carbon, but I do believe in figuring out a way to integrate the value of carbon into our performance when we're doing these ESPC projects, because it's a very valuable attribute. And it's the easiest way to get carbon reduction is through energy efficiency without all these other mandates. Anyway, it's just a reason. I just wanted to pose that to the bigger crowd while y'all are here. And all of us are about the same way. We know that energy efficiency has a direct reduction in carbon, but it's not mandated and it's not really integral to our evaluations, but I think it probably should be. So enough said, I guess, for right now on that.
Scott, thank you for inviting us to come and present to your group. And everyone, remember that you have a great group of energy services professionals with the Texas Energy Services Coalition that you can look up. Just go to Google and look up the Texas Energy Services Coalition.org. And there's 65 experts there that are experts in this stuff on energy efficiency, energy services, and guaranteed energy savings. And, if not, you can also call us at the State Energy Conservation Office. So thank you again, Scott.
You're very welcome. And thanks to Vince and Fred and everybody on the line today. I guess a plug for the local chapter of the Association of Energy Engineers. We appreciate your attendance today. And, we're always looking for programs that people are interested in and provide information that'll be useful to promote the energy efficiency industry. And we're always looking for volunteers to help us with our local organization. So if you have a topic or you're interested in assisting in growing the local chapter, give us a shout, and we'd love to have you participate.
Hey, Scott, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah, give me the story in 15 seconds about that gigantic light bulb behind you.
Well, I just wanted to have a background, so that was just the one I found. I guess there's no particular story behind it, but it is nice. It's a kind of energy related. It is kind of older technology, but no, nothing special about it. It's just a background. I noticed you were in the tropics, which I kind of like too.
So if your light bulb ever goes out, you better jump back to work.
Exactly.
God, you can say, look at me, I'm the before side of the poster. Don't do this, right? No incandescence.
Exactly. This is what you're looking for when you're out there doing your preliminary audits.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time today, and I hope it was informative.
Thank you.
Scott?
Else?
All right. Bye now.
All right. Everybody have a good
Thanks,
day.
Scott.